Okay, so I need to be careful with details, but so the thing is, we weren't asking for the full budget of the game. So that actually did happen. It's like, well, why don't you ask for all of it? We'll take all of it. And it's because, well, no, that's because I don't want a royalty share where you invested so much that we only get a smaller share, right? Because we believed the game was going to work well. And if you're going to ask for a lot more investment, basically what it means is if it doesn't work out, I don't owe you anything and I'm good. I paid for everything. I can be break even at launch and not sell the game. We were very, very confident that the game would be doing well.
Hello again, listeners. My name is Brian Francis. I'm a senior editor at Game Developer and host of the Game Developer Podcast. In 2023, Sabotage Studio released Sea of Stars, a top-down turn-based RPG set in a vibrant fantasy world that echoes classic games like Breath of Fire, Golden Sun, and pre-PlayStation Final Fantasy games. If that sounds familiar, it's because there are a lot of games with similar descriptions releasing every week on PC and consoles. Earlier this year, the studio released a DLC expansion called Throes of the Watchmaker. Other single-player developers charge for DLC like this to generate additional revenue, but Sabotage didn't. It's one of the many ways that Sabotage stands apart in a very competitive field, in a very daunting time for the video game industry. We're thrilled today to be joined by Thierry Boulanger, president and creative director at the company. We wanted to pick his brain about making games in crowded genres, building sustainable development practices, the best approaches to selling DLC, and the general creative vibe that makes Sea of Stars and the studio's first game, The Messenger, so unlike other games on the market. Okay, Thierry, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to have you.
Hey, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Just to get things started, so Throes of the Watchmaker has been out for a couple months now. Would you mind sort of introducing our audience to this DLC pack, like how you conceived of it after Sea of Stars? You know, you ship with this story complete, single-player RPG, and now, you're sort of taking a strategic decision with what to do after with this big update. So would you mind sort of telling our audience about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's been out since May 20th. And basically the idea was from the Kickstarter campaign we had as one of our stretch goals. There would be a DLC, would be free for backers. And then obviously the game got the response that it got. And I would say we were sort of given the means, right? It's like, oh, nice. Now we have this time. We can afford to sort of work on more content, because as we transition to the next project, there's always a period where you can't like have full-on staff. You don't need a full team of animators working on, just prototyping and everything. So DLC for us, like we did after Messenger, is a good way to kind of keep all the staff. And we work on a known quantity. It's like a known pipeline. Guys, we like to say we're so good at making the game by the time we don't have to make it anymore. Yeah. And so it's kind of a good, like, let's distill everything at the highest production value that we discovered, like through the journey of the main game, and make kind of like a more contained experience there. And so since we could afford it, we decided it would be free for everyone, more as like a celebration, a thank you lap, if you will. Yeah. And so in terms of theme and everything, also, it's very kind of like left field compared to the main story of the game. Personally, I'm not a big fan of like, oh, we have this grand epic story of the big evil that was there for 10,000 years and it returns the next day for 48 hours, So it was kind of like, let's change the theme and everything. So that was also kind of a bit of a no-brainer there, to be honest, because we definitely wanted to do something else.
Yeah, I've kind of heard it said, like, you don't know how to make a game until you're done making a game, which then, sort of morphs into, when you're making DLC for a game, you're doing it after you've learned how to do the full main game. But unless you're doing regular content updates, you sort of don't. It's so hard to get an opportunity to really use what you've learned, I guess. Do you agree with that? Or do you sort of think like, a game like Sea of Stars is the process of learning how to make Sea of Stars, I guess?
I think, yeah. I mean, and obviously it will vary, but I think if historically you look at so many games that where the sequel, like when they slap a 2 on it, that's when it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is great. Because the first one was an idea. Let's explore the idea, right? Which is, how do we even make like a camera angle? How does the Cyanoson work? How do we make the controller, the character feel right? And even looking back to something like Mass Effect, right? You look at the first one, and you're like, hey, I don't know about the pacing. The setting is kind of cool. And the second one is like, oh, now they just made content. They didn't spend their time researching the main character and all of that. So it's refining. So I think there a DLC kind of sits in the equivalent of where a sequel could have been back in the day. I would say. So it's definitely fun for us to kind of be, flexing that muscle that we're now more familiar with.
Yeah. Speaking of going from one game to the next, you sort of raise, I think for a lot of indie studios like yours, the first game they set out to make is some degree of like either the dream game or the game they know they can make. I don't know which one the messenger was for either of you. But then, like you said, the second game is a chance to, really like, okay, we've locked in, we've figured something out, and now we can go. But the messenger to Sea of Stars are two very different games. Like someone might say like there's a pixel art that transfers from one to the other, but even then the art direction is so different. So like what was it kind of like bucking that expectation a little bit, at least internally, to go from side-scrolling game to turn-based RPG?
Right. Well, within the team, it was understood. I think the MO like for Sabotage was let's take retro inspirations and modernize, right, to present in terms of gameplay mechanics, like leave behind what didn't necessarily age well, try to rethink some mechanics to make them a bit more engaging. So capturing what we love about those games. And so the thing is that once we have a title that's out, the journey is kind of done for us, right? We've done this like pruning process. We've presented our own like definitive edition, and we don't leave anything on the table. So we're kind of, which also speaks to why we're unlikely to ever make a sequel, because we're done with it by the time. Like what's exciting for us is this discovery of how do we treat what we remember of it, and what do we rethink or not. So obviously you need more than one title out for it to be kind of like understood that that's the mission that you gave your studio. But yeah, the journey continues. Like the one thing we won't do it is what we've already done. The one thing you won't do is what you've already done. I guess then what transfers skill and technical wise from game to game when you're jumping genres like that? I mean, I guess you have the benefit of a lot of problems in these games are quote unquote solved. Big air quotes for the audience here. Biggest air quotes. No problem is solved. But there's a lot of reference material that you're able to take advantage of versus something like Blueprints. I'm just going to pick another very new, very original game. But yeah, what do you transfer from game to game when you're committed to jumping genres like that? Well, I think there's certainly the process of how we look at reference material, how we gather around like our shared sort of like passion for the titles that we want to sort of speak to. And so the process that we do internally and how we approach this and how we refine and where we agree where it sits as like a game that's like really ours. We want to feel like we're, obviously adding something to it, not just harkening back. And so, yeah, I think it's the process. If you kind of draw a circle around all of the games that we would ever do, the sort of the meta part of that. I think in the same way, if you can think of a company like, I'm looking back to Blizzard in like 2009 or whatever, if you look at Diablo and StarCraft and even World of Warcraft, you're like, these games have a lot of things in common, despite being very different genres, right? There's kind of like a signature, there's also a seal of quality, there's a way that the story is delivered. And so you can see sort of like the DNA of the studio itself more than like one intellectual property specifically.
Yeah. What do you think is Sabotage's like DNA when it comes to these genres? Because you sort of have a top level statement of, like modern classic genres, modern spins, but having played both games, like it's funny that modern spin isn't just, like what I would call modern, gameplay tuned for modern devices. Like it's not just that. There's also like, it seems like you guys have a specific point of view on the art direction, the dialogue, the flow of the game, the level design. Like there is something specific you guys are working with here that it's very hard to put my finger on, because there's like a degree of self-awareness, there's a degree of like commitment to the game world that you've built, and sort of like trying to stuff as much like different elements into it as possible. I guess, how would you define that like consistent DNA like across from game to game?
Right. For us, I just really like seeing a band play live when you can tell that they're genuine friends and they're having fun together, and it feels like, oh, it must be great to be a part of this, and I'm invited for one night, and that feels good. for me, that's always like the biggest part of it, even more than sometimes the music itself. And so I think like as a team, that's the thing is we've all been friends for a very long time. We have a very solid core team, and we've always played game together. We still do. And so I think it speaks to the impulse mostly, is that, the first moment that you're excited about an idea and you kind of share, and the people start like yes ending about like a thread that you're following. And then we go into production, and it's like, let's each capture that what we spoke to in our respective crafts, and then we show one another what we made. And does it elevate the frequency of the feeling we're speaking to? Is it dampening it? And how do we kind of like maximize? Because at the end of the day, we want the player to feel the way that we felt, how excited we are about it. And I think what can come across is the commitment from a team that has, virtually no sort of like churn. It's like it's the same people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, but the part of what comes across is what it's like to be on the production floor, Yes.
Yeah. Is there a moment in Sea of Stars that you think, or in the Throes of the Watchmaker DLC, that you think really captures like a moment like that you just described, where it sort of started from one person and then it evolved? Like, is there a gameplay moment, or is there a gameplay moment that you think captures that sensation?
Oh boy, hey, there would probably be too many.
Yeah, in theory, it's the whole thing, but
yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, except from all of them, I would say that the general vibe of especially in the contrast of the bright color and the darker like areas, the moments that feel like a summer vacation and moments that feel like, you just need to kind of get through this. We're very much kind of like we love contrast, I would say. Yeah. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. And contrast, I think, comes through in like. Sometimes when I was playing some of your games, there's sort of a contrast sometimes between characters who are very invested in what you might call like a very traditional story from these eras, like save the world stories that you have. But then there are specific characters who, whether they are like very self-aware about the fact they're in a game or very self-aware about the state of the game world they're in. You guys seem to look for a lot of contrast in the personalities too of who players meet in their journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also something where, whenever, and I mean, you're right. So this, it's like at some point you have to go like, okay, is this as good as I can make it, right? And then you need to kind of give it up, right? You're not really finished. You could technically go on forever. At some point, you need to kind of just go. So some of these are actually like either comic relief or a break in seriousness that like we happen to need, like during the process of production. It's kind of like, this all sounds too serious. That's like, let's break character for a moment here. And it just feels good for us. It relieves a bit of tension, and we're reminded that it's a game. And I think at the end of the day, that's the main thing, I would say, for me in terms of direction, is like, you're sitting down to play a game. Like, you're willingly wanting to engage in immersion, but we also know, it's like a magician show. Just don't show me the strings and I'll pretend you're levitating, but if I see it, then it's kind of like, it kind of breaks the actual magic there. But so I think, part of it is just sometimes a reminder that we're just here to have fun, and our games don't take themselves too seriously, because we like to sit in a place that's like, it's casual, escapism.
Yeah. What was it sort of like? Because this update, you didn't just do, the Throes of the Watchmaker DLC update. You also did what I almost saw advertised on the Steam page as it was almost like Sea of Stars 2.0 in terms of like, adding co-op features like polishing audio, visual, gameplay, such like what's that kind of process like on a single player game, which is in theory supposed to be kind of a fixed thing, but still going in afterward and pushing this kind of huge quality of life update out?
Right. Well, it's always, back to the thing where you're never fully done, right? And so there's always this idea of this would have also been really cool to add. Or for example, we added a full-on like cinematic for a key moment in the game that kind of needed that warranted a production value like this. And it's just thing that at some point you either like can't afford in the first place, or you need to be sort of given the means to get there. You're lacking time or budget, or sometimes both. And so just just how well the game did. It's like, okay, there's interest, there's people who will play it, because at the end we're there to create, moments for players. And so we were given those means, and we saw that people would actually engage with that and would actually appreciate it. So like, okay, let's do the extra mile. It was not a good like business decision, in terms of like the bottom line isn't really a driver for us. We just want to be afloat as a team.
Yeah.
And we are, so we're interested in how do we, create the coolest game essentially.
Yeah. What I think you mentioned a phrase in there that I think is like sometimes a tension of our business, which is like you said, doing this wasn't necessarily a good business decision in terms of the bottom line, but so on and so forth. If I was a listener who wasn't fully aware of why it wasn't a good for the bottom line, like how would you describe that, I guess? Like just sort of help someone catch up the challenge of that particular problem.
Okay, yeah. Well, the idea is that obviously we have we're not a startup anymore, right? We're celebrating 9 years. We celebrated 9 years a couple of months ago. So we're not, at first I wasn't even paying myself the first few months and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, then let's take like a very small salary just to get this going. And so now we're trying to have that everyone that like if they were to leave, it would be because they're more interested in another project, not because they can have better work conditions. So operating a team of a little over 20 people is costly. So if you're going to work on an update for many months, when I say it's a bad business, if I had to justify it to a board of investors that wanted me to guarantee that the return on investment of that time spent on the update, the answer would have been we're probably losing money by working on this and releasing it. But I think the way that we look at this being like fully independent is we're interested about creating these moments for players, and we're interested about the legacy of our games as well. We're not so much about the like financial performance of the title. We just want it to be that you can pick it up in like 5 years, because there's a bit of a evergreen or timeless aspect to retro game. Like there's a ceiling on how much it can be picked up, because a lot of people will always see them as like a more of a niche thing. But also it could have released 2 years ago or in 2 years, and it's kind of like it sits somewhere emotionally. If it resonates for you, you're good with it whenever. So we want people that whenever they come across it, they have the best experience possible.
Yeah. So if you were hypothetically, if there was a hypothetical boardroom where you're pitching this, you're sort of talking about future-proofing it and turning it into a effectively like a game that comes out now. You're trying to make sure when it's in your back catalog, it's just it feels, you can sort of trick players, trick's the wrong word. You can offer players something that doesn't feel like, oh, this came out a few years ago and it's aged. You're in a genre where like you said, evergreenness is almost like an important thing, right? Like it should always feel like it just came out in a strange sense.
Yeah, and there's also an idea where, we make games, we don't really do sort of a market research, we're not trying to chase a trend of, oh yeah, pixel art turn-based is the thing. In fact, we were essentially told the opposite, right? The same when I was pitching Messenger back in the day, I was being told there's too many ninja games. I'm like, no, there's too many zombie games. What are you talking? Like zombie games are everywhere.
But there are a lot of side scrollers.
They are for sure. But for me, it was always, no, let's make this thing and it will actually come from the heart, and we'll polish it as much as we can, and we'll focus on level design and gameplay and immersion and catchy music. And like that, for me, that seems to be the thing, regardless if you want to talk about mobile or VR or the new console or whatever. Something that's well polished, that's focusing on the player experience, usually does well. And so we're betting on that. And part of this legacy idea that we reinvest and we kind of, here's an update, quality of life update. I think, again, if I'm trying to wear the hat of trying to convince someone who's investing, which I think would still be a bad call just from a financial perspective, but it's like someone will look back and if they hesitate on the next title, right? They can be like, oh, look how much more than I was supposed to get that I got with this last title. So I can bet on them again and not just drop it and disappear. They will care, they will listen, they will update, they will take in what we found there, and they'll try to improve on it and everything. So I think that can be part of the argument.
Yeah. I think I'm pushing down this lane for a minute, if only in the sense that I talk to a lot of I've talked to sort of up and down, like people closer to the business side trying to justify these arguments or push back saying they can't afford it. I've talked to people, purely in the design world who are like, if we could do this, I know it would sell thousands of units, and where I have been trying to wrap my head around as someone watching and participating in the video game development community is like, I almost feel like this is an industry where you need to learn when something that doesn't have a clear ROI is actually one of the best ROI things you can do. And I think not adapting for that has actually steered a lot of companies into strange waters or bad waters because insisting that everything needs some kind of ROI can lead you into instances where you either provoke player backlash, you burn out your devs, you don't let them have any fun. Like it just feels like an industry where you sort of can't make those decisions. But at the same time, when you make a call like that, when you say, we're going to do this, even though there's no clear financial return, like how do you weigh that and say, okay, but how do you make sure that doesn't bankrupt you, I guess? Like, how do you make sure you do that and then you don't burn the company down in the process?
Right. Well, so I mean, part of it is management and scope as well, right? I mean, like being a smaller team, it's also less variables, and then we're aware of a monthly burn rate. We're aware of monthly sales, and we're tracking these numbers. And it's not like your game is going to go from this tendency to like 0 the next day, so you can kind of try to see it coming, and you sort of like adjust. That's something that we work on, on a weekly basis as part of managing the studio. But also like just more from the design perspective, like if maybe to kind of switch a little bit is
please
anything that has to do with design, right? And let's step away from game to maybe it's like we're making clothes, right? Okay, so you can only make the coolest dress that you can think of and that to make, right? And it's not so much it's out of your hands once you've made it, but it really comes down to how many people will resonate with it, how many people will want to kind of like consume it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you're trying to chase a trend, this other one really picked up because it was using this color, I'll use that color as well. The odds are that you're in a too little too late territory, right?
Yeah.
If you're taking too big of a risk that you're only making it for yourself and then no one gets it, then it can still be extremely cool. But you just don't happen to have a market that allows you to sustain your creative endeavors.
Yeah.
So where we're at, and the thing that we bet on is that as a team, when we all agree, and we're knocking on wood, right? But we're 2 and 2. But when we all agree that an idea is worth pursuing and producing to the full extent, to the full quality that we know to make it, enough people agree with us that it's a worthwhile thing to engage with, that it sustains the team. So that thing it's been 9 years, and it feels like we have predictability on that. It's possible that we'll announce the next thing and overwhelmingly we hear like no thanks, and that would mean okay, now we have a choice. We either make this at a loss because we so need to make it, or are we out of touch? Are we played out? Are we, what I mean? But where we are right now is without wanting to become arrogant at all about it, is we kind of have this confidence, like as long as it keeps coming from the heart and us being excited, and we know we're not forcing anything, we know we're not chasing a trend. By the time we're done massaging this thing, there should be enough people to keep us afloat for the next thing. And so we kind of have this confidence, I would say, at this point.
Yeah. Kickstarter, you brought up Kickstarter, and I think something is happening outside of you guys, which is that Kickstarter is suddenly popping back on my radar more often again with studios, with like solid pedigrees, going back to players and pitching. And we're way past the days, when Double Fine raised those millions of dollars for Broken Age, right? But you guys were in the middle. You guys, there was like, this is a peak. Maybe this is a new peak right here. I'm making physical peaks with my hands with the listeners. And you guys were in like a little valley in there where devs were doing it, but it wasn't like the big headline grabbing thing that it was before. What was it like kind of in that period for Kickstarter? And what do you think you like learned about the process that made it really work for you?
Yeah, that one was, I would say we spent about 6 months maybe doing sort of like research, looking at what worked, what didn't work, and making sure we set our expectations and that we didn't need kind of like the viral home run for it to even be for it to work out. And at the end of the day, we bet on how many people we felt like we could reach on our own,
Yeah.
and what percentage of that we felt we could sort of like either convince or like sell on the idea. And that was sort of like our test to be like, okay, if we're all in and we make this, because if it doesn't work out, we're closing our doors. And so we sort of needed like at the gate that sort of validation.
Yeah.
It went, and all proportions kept equal. It went to the moon in our perspective, and so that really helped. And then it also helped for business, because then if you're looking for funding, or if you're considering publishing, or if you're looking to be on a deal somewhere, Game Pass or whatever, you kind of have this social proof that kind of like helps, your argument and everything. So no, for us it was good. It was good all around. But we also wanted, how we had on the staff, we had Mitsuda, who's like a obviously legendary composer, but we didn't lead with that, right? Because we didn't want it to be kind of like, I don't want to say a fluke, but kind of like, oh yeah, we're just cashing in this name, so of course it works. So we first tested the idea. And then we know that campaigns usually in the middle, you were talking about a valley, the things you did with your hands also happen inside of a campaign, right? The first 2 days and last 2 days are kind of like your peaks. And so the valley there in the middle was our announcement that it's like, oh, can we have a peak in the middle? That would be pretty cool. And so all of that kind of landed very well for us. So it allowed us first to test just the idea on its own, then have that added value, and then all that kind of combined into, okay, now we were seeing like opportunities that seemed to match the excitement that we feel for the project. And so then we were able to get to work.
Yeah, there's kind of an interesting thing you raised, if only because like you're low key in the position again. So you mentioned up top, it was sort of like land the Kickstarter or close your doors, if I'm hearing that correctly. So am I correct in hearing?
It would have been the game itself. Like by the time the game comes out, we're in the red. So the Kickstarter validated there is excitement for this proposition.
Oh, okay. So then
we go all in for like 4 years, and it feels safe because we got a sample of whether people or not want to buy it. But yeah.
It's kind of like, this is something I've been wracking my head around. It's like single player studios since the dawn of time have struggled with, if your games aren't like, like the I don't know, like Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, like I'm just going to name one from yesteryear, if it's not so big that it keeps generating sales as it spreads into pop culture, everyone is dealing with, like the launch spike and then the tail, and then maybe, some kind of Among Us grade, like late pickup of some kind. But you mentioned, and it's interesting because you're sort of, I think, would I be accurate in asking if the Messenger itself essentially couldn't fund your next game on its own, right? Like no matter what, you were going to be looking for development funding from somewhere?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't exactly fully fund it, especially because after the Kickstarter, the response that we saw was like, okay, let's actually go all in with the production value. So we ended up with a bigger team than we initially plan, because you have scenario A, scenario B, you have like sunny day, you have like worst case, and so we ended up being able to do like the best case scenario, which was more people. So that also did take more funding, but it came with sort of the social proof. So we were able to get
it
that
came
as
with
well.
Kickstarter,
yeah. But no, so Messenger, I would say like per capita, they're probably similar, but it's a team of 25 instead of a team of 6, right? So it's kind of like we couldn't scale up to 26 with like the...
How do you feel like as a company president, and thank you for bearing with me on sort of a long... this is a year where like I feel like talking about the business of games is like kind of what's on everyone's mind. So it's been on my mind too. When you're a company president and you're sort of like, how do you sort of in your head balance like, okay, like the product's low key, or it's sort of like, how do you sort of figure out where to put the boundaries of what your business will even reach for when you sort of don't get consistent, like during the time you're making your next game, you're not making enough money from your previous game to fund that game, right? On its own, like there's sort of I feel like studio leaders everywhere have been trying to figure this out for a long time, which is, unlike other kinds of small businesses, you can't, the turnaround between investment and revenue is so long that I feel like sometimes it's hard to like make reasonable decisions around. Do you find that to be the case, or am I like wandering off in the woods here?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's part of why it's harder for me to speak on it is that now we're in a situation where it's kind of like, yeah, let's just work on something else, and we don't really
Yeah.
have to worry about, which is very like fortunate, and it's like a real blessing. So the thing, meaning like I'm a bit less aware of how to kind of play this in the current landscape.
No, yeah.
I can speak to, after Messenger and everything, like what we did, what happened, and everything. Also, it's like everything stems from the previous thing, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
like any opportunities, any funding that you're able to get, that all comes from sort of like an authority that you either build or didn't build, and then the budget you were able to handle can make someone happy to like trust you with something else. And so it's really like for us from a business perspective, it really genuinely just comes from, we're excited about making this, and we believe that enough people will gather around it. And but you're right, like when we were making Sea of Stars, that was the situation, was essentially I'm in debt for the rest of my life if no one buys this game, right?
Yeah.
But it was a place where, okay, but I'm making this with my friends, it's kind of like a meaningful thing for all these years, and I'll be thankful like for that, even if it's the only outcome. And now we happen to be given the means to be able to kind of take that risk again. And that's where we are. I don't need a boat. I just want to make games with my friends, and so we're able
Yeah.
to do that. So it's a real blessing. But in terms of the current landscape, I think probably pitching early and like just keeping track of the landscape of like who's signing what and what are the sort of like what are the tiers that you can try to kick into. Because I remember after Messenger, pitching to, obviously I can't really name companies or people, but we've been turned down sometimes because we weren't asking enough, right? And not necessarily like, oh, the game should cost more. It's just like, no, we're only interested in investing in this like minimum tier or whatever, and things like that. And so that's also another thing to navigate. But I think just being out there, talking to people, and just getting a sense. And I think one thing that's surprising is, or one thing just from talking to other indie devs who are trying to figure this out, is the amount of things that you can just flat out ask with precise numbers and say like, no, can you just please give it to me straight? I'm trying to figure it out. Most people will actually try to help. They're not going to like obfuscate and like try to rope you into something. It's like, at the end of the day, everyone is involved. There's countless other ways to invest that could be smarter. Like on some level, everyone cares about creating entertainment. So that's what you need to kick into if it's going to be a good relationship anyway, right?
Yeah. I sort of, someone sort of said to me recently that, given where interest rates are, like investors are often looking again, they're comparing what they invest against your studio against like a standard like stock market peg or whatever in terms of ROI. And the person I was speaking with was sort of depressed, like, I don't know how I could like, guarantee, even that percentage rate, against the standard market. And it's sort of like, and it's a strange culture where you sort of need people to look at the ROI, not just as, what pops out after, years after your first investment is, but what impact can you make with people at such a level that they come back, for your next one it's a strange dynamic the industry has. If I can follow up with something you said there, you mentioned, I've heard this too. You pitched Sea of Stars around, and some people turned you down because you weren't asking for enough money. Obviously how do you feel about that when you hear it? Because I've heard some other people talk about it, and they're like, like I'll just make up some numbers. They're like, I want to make a game for like 1 million, 2 million, ship it in these next 2 years, etc. And then they'll hear, no, we'll only fund you if you take, if it's 10 million and you put in this stuff, and they sort of balk at that. I've also explained this to people not in games, and they lose their minds because they're like, why would you not want more money? So, Thierry, why did you not want more money? That's the starting question.
Oh, you mean why I wouldn't ask more for the game?
Yeah, why wouldn't you want that extra money?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, like, why wouldn't they invest in something smaller?
No.
No, so it wasn't, I'm sorry, maybe when it came off wrong when I said it, but it's not like ask for more and we'll sign it, It's like, no, it's when we look at a reasonable budget for what you're pitching, it's below where we like to partake in risk and the overhead that's part of any endeavor that we do, right? Because meaning like, oh, this amount is too low for us to do like localization, assign an account manager to you, slate a release in our calendar that's already full or whatever, right? So that's basically where it's at. It's not that I would I don't think like I would sort of inflate a budget. Like I get the point, but the thing is also like sometimes. Okay, so I need to be careful with details, but so the
Absolutely,
thing
yeah.
is, we weren't asking for the full budget of the game, so that actually
Yeah.
did happen. It's like, well, why don't you ask for all of it? We'll take all of it, and it's because, well, no, that's because I don't want a royalty share where you invested so much that we only get a smaller share, right? Because we believed the
Yeah.
game was going to work well. And if you're going to ask for a lot more investment, basically what it means is if it doesn't work out, I don't owe you anything and I'm good. I paid for everything. I can be break even at launch and not sell the
Yeah.
game. We were very, very confident that the game would be doing well. So we were looking for a model where, we would get the lion's share for our work. So that means we
Of course,
wanted
yeah.
sort of less investment. And so we
Yeah.
also wanted to self-publish, which was, you speak to, because you spoke about this. Sorry, I'm circling back to a thing you said,
No,
but
please
you talked
do.
about like, how do you build your own brand, right? Because for us,
Yeah.
that's a way to kind of, I shouldn't say like kind of feel safe that we can stay afloat, right? You can be with your favorite publisher, right? Which we were with Messenger, but you'll never be like cooler than them, right? You're a game on their catalog, and that's who people know, and a lot of people think they make the games and everything. And even though they go out of their way to correct people and put developer first, you're first on the splash screen, everything, it's harder to build your brand. And so the fact that we're now public facing, like as Sabotage, and like you look on Steam, it's like we're developer, we're publisher, so we're growing our own name. The studio itself has followers. That's also a very lucky position to be in. But now we're able to kind of build our own name. So we got investment. We work with a Kowloon Knight, right? Who their publisher is Kepler, but Kowloon Knights is the investor, the investment fund, and we work with them. They let us self-publish and everything. So. That really helps. That means we can build our own brand, and now we have access to everything, right? Because so let me give you just one example. If you have a publisher, it's great. You're doing great, right? But then they're publishing your game, right? So they pay you, right? But if you're the publisher and you have an investor, you pay them. So you kind of like own all the dashboards, all the reporting and everything. Because if you sign your game with this amazing publisher, you don't have access to the dashboard on Nintendo, for example, to see all the numbers, to put it on sale yourself. Why? Because they're not going to give you access to putting someone else's game on sale or to have their numbers, which are private. Mm-hmm. So you need to like be asking for reports, and they help, but your mileage can vary there depending on who you're working with. Again, we were super fortunate to be with Devolver, but these are all kind of like things or like irritants. Like if you want to try to do your marketing yourself, you want to optimize your game, your sales strategy, you want to be able to track everything, you need to be able to hold the wheel, right? Yeah. And so by self-publishing, you're also able to do that. So then you grow like your studio and your presence, and then you come up with a next release, and you can have an idea like, oh, we can push a news here or there instead of asking like, hey, would you mind pushing something for us? And maybe they already asked something to Steam for a game that's bigger than yours, and now they're on cooldown, and you're like, well, okay, then I guess we're not getting anything, which again aren't really things we've been through, but we hear from other developers. So
yeah,
being fully in control of these things definitely helps,
Absolutely. I've heard from, something I've heard when talking to other developers, is you might have a situation where you're, say almost a duplicate situation of yours is one game goes out with a publisher, get that support. It's great. You have a great relationship, but then the publisher takes the bigger cut. Second game comes out. It sells fewer copies, but then every copy you sell and every marketing push you make, you get more take home from each one, and you have more agency over, like release schedules, like updates, like the whole nine yards. It's fascinating because I feel like we were in a decade of pitching publishers and investors living off of the lower interest rates that we had, able to effectively get these smaller games off the ground and shipped, but then that led us into a tangle of everyone involved kind of being in a weird position when the developer sort of isn't making enough money off their games to keep making games, and they're still chasing that cycle. When publishers get hit and investors get hit by those interest rates, when Steam changes an algorithm or something, it just sort of creates these multiple points of failure in the equation. Not to say that every studio should self-publish. I don't think that's the right answer either, but these are the concerns you bring up are structural and affect everyone, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If I can ask one more question about Kickstarter before I take off my MBA hat today and pretend like I paid attention in business school. I've never heard anything bad about this, but it's something I've thought about raising money on Kickstarter is when you go to Kickstarter and you're lucky enough to go, ask your fans, your players for their money instead of, an investor's money, and the ROI that they're getting is, just the game. You are, you're building a loyal audience of like a few thousand people, but you're also effectively collecting the payment, the MSRP of your game, or maybe more, with backer editions or less with the supporter editions, tiers, not editions. But, how do you, when you're in that position of going, yes, we did it, we built our fan base, and, we've raised some funding from this that will help us with the game. How do you then make sure that doesn't, become lost revenue when you do your big launch? Because this is people, what they're going to get is they're going to get a key, right? They're not going to buy it on day one. They bought it on day negative year 3. I guess, how do you make sure that doesn't ruin your day, I guess?
So there's a couple of things there. It's funny because it's exactly the kind of conversations we would have forever, like 4 years ago before setting out to do like what about that, right? So first of all, Kickstarter will takes a cut, right? And then also, as you mentioned, they're pre-sales. So not only are they pre-sales, you're also getting taxed like that year on those sales, but you're looking at the full amount and you're like, let's make a game with that money, right? Let's not send over, and we're in Canada to boot, right? So the taxes are. They sting. And the other thing too is that you can't like just distribute a copy of a game from Kickstarter. You still need to give them a key, right? Okay, so someone is going to buy a key, because here's another one is on Steam, you can just generate a key and give it. They're cool with it. They just don't want you to sell it like too low compared to where it's at on Steam and stuff like that. But if you're on any console, there's a 30% rake. Whenever you sell a copy, whenever someone buys a copy, obviously the platform takes a cut, as they should, right? They develop a console and everything, and they have a store and all. Anyway, but the thing is, you can't just generate a key and give it. You get some keys for press or whatever. It's part of like a standard release. You just ask for it. They give you like a couple hundred, but these keys are not for kind of like resale. So you sold those copies, so you can't use those. So you need to buy your keys essentially, or you have a conversation, you come up with an agreement, or you have something going on there that you try to figure out. But it's kind of like, so cool. We have like 25,000 backers. Well, hold on. Now we have 25,000 times 30% of the cost of the game potentially, because we don't know, are you going to pick PC? Are you going to pick Switch when it comes out? Or are you going to, and so, in terms of how you do it, for us, it was, we treated Kickstarter, and that's despite raising $1 million, what I'm about to tell you, we treated it as it would be roughly break even and perhaps a loss, because of all the customer support, because of all the follow-ups, because of all the shipping to different like countries that we don't know yet how it's going to work or what the landscape will be. By the time we reach that moment, all the uptime that you're going to have, like, someone changed the address, someone has a question, we're also making a bunch of custom assets in the game, all the statues and everything. It was amazing, but we did it for the journey, genuinely to include people. Again, if it was just a business decision, there's something to be said about the marketing aspect of it, because it gave us authority, right? So we were in a conversation, we were a known quantity, we had people who would like push for the game to work out because they invested in it. So all of that came back, but indirectly, right? So it wasn't like the amount itself. I think it like paid for itself. But then really what it was is a gigantic marketing beat, and also that social proof that can lead to business opportunities. Then you can be like on the store, you can be greenlit more quickly. You can get like, if you happen to need a dev kit for something, you're like, hey, we're this thing that everyone's talking about these days. So they send it, stuff like that. So most of it was we only look at the financials usually when we talk about a Kickstarter. For us, it was everything except that. It's funny, you mentioned in there like the custom statues and nameplates, and that flashed me back to wandering through the room in the game where you've put all the backer rewards and the statues of different sizes. And I remember looking at it and going, oh my God, like I was overwhelmed by what you guys made for that. And and looked at it, and I was like, in another instance, I could see this being kind of a weird scaling problem. Like, how do you produce this many? But I was playing the game, and I was like, okay, so it worked out for you guys. And it was
it was such an interesting thing because it was both like it made it was hidden away. It wasn't somewhere you found on the main quest that where someone left their name as like Jackson's dog something like because there were plenty of people with tributes to their dogs in there.
Yeah.
But it was also this like fascinating Kickstarter artifact that I think shows up in a lot of games now, mostly in the credits, right? Like you're watching the credits and all of a sudden 2,000 Kickstarter backers, roll by. But then when in-game rewards show up, like it's this interesting, creative, like how do you make sure it's in the game and right? I don't even know if there's a question at the end of this. I just remembered the room and was suddenly bowled over by the memory of the room itself.
It was it was a lot. It was a lot for sure. Where I will say I think it was sort of like smart is that on the one hand, people investing in the game emotionally, right? Because they're like, oh, I can be with like my kid on there, or we had so many like teary-eyed stories with these, and it was so that connection was really great. But the thing also is that at the tail end of production, we're not just billing the artist to somewhere else or firing them or like or starting something else too early, like just do something. It was like, oh, there's going to be a long time where the game has to be content complete. And we're fixing bugs, we're polishing, we're adjusting a couple of things here or there. And so, we can all be busy, like sort of doing that, just kind of like churning assets, right? And so that was kind of also like, oh, it filled kind of like nicely this section of production where everyone stays busy until the end, right? So it worked out pretty nicely. But it was a lot.
And it's in a non-Kickstarter environment, like it's not the only way to fill that time, right? But at other studios, like you said, it's, oh no, are we laying people off? Maybe they're on a contract, so you just wind down the contract when you hit that point where they can't do anything. If they are on staff, like you said, do you just have them sort of start spinning their wheels on something that may or may not get made? Like it's an interesting, I almost wonder if other studios, when they hit that point, can look at those windows and go, even if they don't have Kickstarter backing about it, like what can we do with people in this time that doesn't feel like a waste of time, that can feel rewarding, but also doesn't interfere with that, like content log aspect of the game. I wonder. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. Like I said, I really want to take my MBA hat off because what's funny is working for game developer, I like have thought more about the business of video games than I ever want to. And I also like fight every day to make sure I'm still like engaging with what's interesting about them creatively. Which I guess then I can easily ask like, looking ahead, it could be the tiniest teaser of your next game, or just as you like look out at the landscape, like what's got you excited about making video games at the moment? Like what's something interesting that you're like, man, I want to play with that. I want to see what other people do with that. Like what kind of about video games themselves is really like catching your attention right now?
There's never been like, for me, games never stop being exciting, like since I was 3, right? And so there's no, like that thing is just sort of undying, and also this connection with, like, again, with the team and everything. It's like we still play, we still replay the classics, we still look forward to the new stuff and have like gaming nights to try everything. I think there's like always a curiosity of like, how did they make this? Because it's always like, for me, in my view, a game is always, some people had this impulse, and sometimes even only one person, had this vision of like, oh, this feels great, I want to capture this, I want to make it like bigger, I want to present it, I want other people to be compelled in a good way to feel this thing that I feel. And for me, it's kind of like a kid that comes up to you like, hey, I drew this, from this memory of the time you talked about whales or whatever. And it's like, oh, that lived in your head and you like crystallized it and you're presenting it to me. And for me, it's still kind of like that. I boot a game and I'm like, okay, like some people just had fun bringing this to life, and they had like a genuine reason for it. And I want to feel that connection, right?
Yeah.
I like this line from Thomas Kalnoky. He's a ska singer. He says, Hemingway is a good friend of mine. We go drinking from time to time, right? So he likes to read something. It's the idea that you can kind of hang out with the artist just by interacting with the work. Yeah. For me, that's still a thing. Yeah, that's still very, very important to me. So
yeah. Have you ever gotten to play a game, have that experience, and then spend time talking with the person who made it? And I guess like, how did that compare and contrast? Like as you talk to their person about their work versus how you experienced it?
Yeah, well, that's That could easily be an emotional one. Meeting Mitsuda was obviously like you know, it was a very very big moment because his music was kind of when I came online and when I was then like, oh, there's a creative hand, there's a guiding hand behind
Hmm.
what I'm playing. There's like intention here. And I remember his track in the woods in Guardia Forest, the way the music plays, it's kind of like the rays of light between the leaves that like kick on the floor, and it's helping me feel like I'm in a forest and everything. And I essentially got to tell him exactly that, and he was happy that I appreciated the detail.
Yeah.
Um, but mostly, what I really liked about meeting was how he just instantly humanized everything.
Hmm.
He like laughs a lot, and there was no like sense of like, hey, like must be amazing for you to talk to, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're
Yeah.
just trying to make some cool stuff. And
Yeah.
you're just genuinely happy to be part of something that brings some aliveness, and so no, I think in this way we're kind of like, um it's the same with aging. We're all this age, just not at the same time. Hopefully we all reach it, but we all have it, just at different moments. And so just being at different places. But when you meet someone like that, it's kind of like we all carry the same thing. And I mean, right? Whether you're
Yeah.
doing press, you're organizing events, you're a developer, you're a player. Like everyone feels something very special about games, and in their own way, they want to keep that alive, or they want to keep on celebrating it. And it's kind of like you meet someone, it's like, oh, we have this shared passion. Oh, that's how you express it. Oh, interesting. And then you can sort
Yeah.
of have that common ground. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
Have
Mhm.
you ever experienced anything on, the shared passion for games? Have you ever had an unexpected encounter or an encounter in a way that like helps you bring people into that experience, right? Like I sort of think about how um I think about how we've broadly got this market identity of the quote unquote gamer that is sort
Mhm.
of locked away with the love of games. But then I regularly,
Yep.
like, when I'm talking to people outside of games, I go, "Oh, what do you play?" And they go, "Oh, well, I play like," they'll go, "I play like I play Clash of Clans. Oh yeah, and then I play Stardew Valley." And I'm like, "Cool, you're like,"
Mhm.
and I say, when I say you're a gamer, I mean in the sense of like, "Cool, you like playing games? Like that's legit." Is what I'm trying to
Mhm.
communicate.
Mhm.
Um, but because this seems to be so animating to how you run you work with your colleagues, like what's
Mhm.
it like when you encounter people who are still figuring out that joy for themselves? Like what's that experience been like for you?
The developers, you mean?
Or you're a developer and you meet someone who like maybe is like interested in games or maybe interested in your game, like sort of how do you think have you had any experience connecting those people to like your games or something and found any connection there?
Oh, you mean for fans of our games?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, these moments are always. I think the most important thing is always to kind of humanize. Like I don't really like if someone goes like, oh my god, it's you. It's kind of like, hey, or
Yeah.
I'm just a guy. Like I just I like coffee in the morning. I play some games and I get to work, and so it's kind of like, but sharing and sort of again, I think connecting on that core level of like, oh, what did you find during your sort of like your journey? Because again, it's really about we put something out there and then people experience it and they have their own experience around it. And you have some people, especially with something like co-op, it's wild. It's like people are like, oh, I
Yeah.
played this with my cousin. We used to do this as kids and we reconnected on this thing over Christmas. It was like magical. And then
Yeah.
we set out to like, oh, we'll be playing more games again. And I think of all the players as they kind of have their like journey as gamers, and we're only one chapter, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes I like to think in terms of game design and direction, like where do we want to sit in someone that maybe has played everything, and will
Yeah.
play something else the next day, or will play something else while they're also playing this. Like, what's the unique like flavor here? And if they like that feeling, that connection, they want to stay a while longer or whatever. But no, yeah, I think making sure we add something sort of like unique and meaningful is something for people to remember, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. And so when they tell us like, oh, I remember this and I remember that, it's kind of like, yeah, that's great. You had
Yeah.
you had moments that kind of made you feel grounded, kind of,
Yeah.
and that thing was kind of like the thing that grounded you. So that's great. You remember
Yeah.
that summer day now. You remember that vacation or whatever.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the co-op, that you guys added to the game,
Mm.
because like it's another one of those things that listeners might hear me like bring up or poke around again, is like how there is like kind of a new, like simultaneously both very familiar for anyone who's ever grown up playing games. Your friends come over and you just literally pass the controller around. To there's something new. There is a new kind of it though, where like you just like play games online with your friend, not so much to finish them or hit a goal or beat a challenge or compete, but like just to kind of hang out and mess around. And I think you guys, but by adding co-op to your game, you've created a mess around together feature. It's not necessarily about doing the whole journey together. It's about getting that time and that time just happens to be in Sea of Stars.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Last question for today. Is there anyone on your team that who doesn't necessarily get to have their work be front and center in, when you're talking to press, when you're talking to people like me, they're sort of like easy wins for talking about, this person, level designer, they made this feature, or is there anyone on your team who you'd like to give a particular shout out to today in terms of like how their work maybe doesn't get seen as much by the public or the press? Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to today on that front?
Well, I mean, yeah. Again, other than all of them, I will say, level design. In terms of level design, I'm it's a daily treat to be kind of like bouncing ideas with this level of a mind when it comes to level design. That's Phil Dion. There's two Phils here. One is marketing and business with me, and the other is level design. So Phil Dion is for sure. I wouldn't make games without him. And then I think all the coders, right? I like gameplay code, tools. The guys are close. They're closer to the engine, integrating all the assets and everything. It's for sure, tech is always the unsung hero, right? Because we see the art, we appreciate it. We hear the music, we appreciate it. The gameplay kind of comes together, but no one really goes like, "Ooh, that was really well optimized. I appreciated that." Or like, "Oh, it was so smooth. The transition here was like, ooh, they really made sure that it was seamless." And also, it's holding it together, but also it's good when it's invisible, right? It's a bit of a curse, kind of like UI and everything. It's if you notice it, it's because something's wrong, right? You'll talk about code when there's a bug or when the loading is too long, and when you have nothing to talk about, you don't say thanks to the code. You just don't talk about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Thierry, thank you so much for chatting today. Good luck with whatever comes next, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Thierry. Be sure to check out Sea of Stars and Throes of the Watchmaker if you haven't already. I put 30 hours into the base game back in 2023 and loved every minute of it. For more from Sabotage Studio, you can visit their website or find them on Blue Sky at sabotagestudio.com. For more from Game Developer, be sure to visit www.gamedeveloper.com, follow us on major social platforms, and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Blue Sky at brianfrancis.me. See you around.